When I was a little girl, I would pretend I was a princess, trapped in the tower, and then this knight on a white horse would come charging.
Pretty Woman is a well-loved romantic movie, but there's a lot about it that many people barely know. From funny moments that are spontaneous to interesting behind-the-scenes facts, here are 20 surprising things about Pretty Woman that you most probably did not know before now. Number 20. Pretty Woman was already a dark movie 040 to 045. Believe it or not, Pretty Woman didn't start as the charming love story that we all know, love, and buzz about. The original script was titled 3000, which referred to the amount of money Edward paid Vivian for the week. However, instead of being a feel-good romantic comedy, it was a really dark and depressing drama. In the original version of the drama, Vivian was a substance user, and Edward wasn't the kind, charming businessman we remember. He was cold and harsh. Their relationship was transactional and even emotionally distant. The script ended with Edward dropping Vivian back on the streets, throwing the money at her, and driving away without a second glance. There was no fairy tale, no white limo, and no happy ending either. The ending was a heartbreakingly realistic conclusion. J.F. Lawton wrote the original script, which shocked many people. When Disney's Touchstone Pictures got involved and director Gary Marshall came on board, the tone shifted completely. Marshall believed the story had the potential to be something more hopeful. With some rewrites and a big dose of charm, it turned into the romantic classic that we know today. So yes, the drama, Pretty Woman, was almost a tragedy. But thanks to a few changes, we got one of the most iconic love stories of the 90s instead. Number 19. Julia Roberts wasn't the first choice. It's hard to imagine anyone else acting as Vivian Ward, right? Julia Roberts totally owned that role. But guess what? She wasn't the first, and not even the second choice for the part. When the casting team began searching for the ideal actress to portray Vivian, they approached several prominent Hollywood stars. Meg Ryan, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, and even Daryl Hannah were all considered, but they either turned it down or didn't feel comfortable playing the role of an adult worker. Some of them thought the story was too edgy or just didn't feel right for their image at the time. Drew Barrymore and Winona Ryder auditioned too, but they were considered too young to play the role. At that time, Julia Roberts wasn't well known yet. She was still relatively new in the industry, though she had made a splash in Mystic Pizza and Steel Magnolias. When she came into audition, something clicked. Her charm, her big smile, her natural warmth, every single thing about her stood out. The producers began seeing her potential. So even though she was not the first person, Julia ended up being the perfect choice for the role. And honestly, you'll agree with me that nobody would have done it better. She turned that role into a career-defining moment and won hearts worldwide. Number 18. Richard Gere didn't want the role at first. As surprising as it sounds, Richard Gere almost didn't play Edward Lewis, the suave, wealthy businessman that millions of fans swooned over. Yeah, he said no more than once when the role was first offered to him. He abruptly declined it without even giving it further thought. At the time, Gere was already a well-known actor thanks to movies like An Officer and a Gentleman and American Gigolo. However, he wasn't really into romantic comedies. He was not too good at them. He felt that the character of Edward was flat and lacked much emotional depth. In short, he thought the role was kind of boring, so he kept turning it down relentlessly. The amusing thing now is that it took Julia Roberts herself to change his mind. Director Gary Marshall arranged a meeting between the two actors to see if they had any chemistry, and boy did they. During their chat, Julia slipped him a note that said, "Please say yes." Gere was so charmed by her, just the same way Edward was later charmed by Vivian, that he finally agreed to do the film. Thank goodness that he did, because Richard Gere and Julia Roberts had a really amazing on-screen chemistry. Their connection made the movie unforgettable. People took an interest in the film because of the spice that their love added to it. Number 17. The jewelry box scene was totally unscripted. One of the most memorable and adorable scenes in Pretty Woman was when Edward gifted Vivian with a stunning necklace. As she reached out to touch it, he suddenly snapped the jewelry box shut directly on her fingers. Julia let out a big, spontaneous laugh, and it became one of the most iconic moments in the entire film. The fun part in this, just like most of their love plays, was that most of these moments weren't in the script at all. It was completely improvised by Richard Gere and director Gary Marshall. The story goes that Julia Roberts was feeling tired during filming that day, and the energy on set was low. To liven things up, Gary Marshall told Gere to surprise her a little just for fun. So when they were filming the scene with the necklace, which had been purchased for $250, yes, it was a real necklace, loaned by a jewelry store with a security guard on set. Gere suddenly snapped the box shut as a joke. Julia was extremely shocked. It wasn't something she had expected at all, at least not at the moment. That split-second joke turned into one of the film's most charming and unforgettable scenes. Fans loved it, and it helped capture the sweet, playful side of their relationship. It's a perfect example of how unplanned, raw moments can sometimes outshine even the most carefully written lines. Number 16. The red dress was almost black. Can you imagine the opera scene in Pretty Woman without that stunning red gown? It's one of the most iconic fashion moments in movie history. Vivian walking down the stairs in that off-the-shoulder red dress, paired with sparkling diamonds and that unforgettable smile. Believe it or not, the dress was almost a completely different color. Originally, costume designers planned for Vivian to wear a black dress to the opera because black is classic, elegant, and safe. The producers thought it would be more sophisticated and fitting for a Cinderella moment. However, director Gary Marshall didn't succumb at all. He believed red would make a much stronger statement, one that was bold, romantic, and unforgettable. It would stand out on screen and add more passion to the scene. There was a lot of back and forth about it. The studio thought red might be too flashy, and they were worried it wouldn't photograph well or match them. The costume designer, Marilyn Vance, created a few test dresses in different shades of red to convince them. Eventually, they settled on a deep, rich red that perfectly matched Julia Roberts' features and lit up the screen, and the result was movie magic. That red dress became a symbol of Vivian's transformation, from a street girl to a confident woman stepping into a new world. Paired with that jaw-dropping $250 diamond necklace, it was pure elegance. Number 15. Julia Roberts' body wasn't used on the movie poster. The woman on the Pretty Woman poster isn't actually Julia Roberts from the neck down. The body you see in the famous image of Vivian in a short dress and thigh-high boots, leaning back to back with Richard Gere, is that of a body double. Julia's head was added later through photo editing. The body in the poster belongs to Shelley Michelle, a professional body double who was hired for the shoot. At the time, movie posters were often designed separately from the actual film production, and it wasn't uncommon for studios to use stand-ins for promotional materials, especially when these studios were racing against time to market the film. Not only was Julia's body replaced, but Richard Gere's look was also completely altered. In the actual photo shoot, he had dark hair and wore a black suit. For the final poster, they digitally changed his hair to gray to match his character in the film and brightened up his suit. What you see on the movie poster is not a real photo, but a mashup of different people and edits. Julia was still relatively new to Hollywood at the time, and the marketing team probably did not expect her to become such a massive star after the movie's release. Ironically, the poster became as iconic as the film itself, and most people never realized that it was not really her. This weird little fact just shows how much behind-the-scenes editing goes into making a movie look perfect, and it shows even down to the posters. While Julia was the heart and soul of the film, it was that famous image that helped promote it, not entirely her. Number 14. A body double was used for the opening scene. The very first scene in Pretty Woman, the one where we see Vivian putting on her iconic thigh-high boots, is not Julia Roberts like we thought. That shot, along with several other close-ups of Vivian's body throughout the movie, was performed by a body double. The double used for these scenes was Shelley Michelle, the same woman whose body was used for the movie poster. At the time, it was common for body doubles to be used in scenes where close-ups of legs, hands, or other body parts were needed, especially if the main actor wasn't available or comfortable filming those specific shots. In Julia's case, she was still quite young. She was just 21 during filming and fairly new to leading roles. Some of the more revealing shots in the film, like scenes where Vivian is getting dressed, zipping up her boots, or showing skin, were considered too sensitive, and the production decided it would be better to use a trained body double instead. Shelley Michelle later became well known for her work as a double in Hollywood, and she has even been nicknamed the body double to the stars. She stood in for numerous actresses, but her work in Pretty Woman is among the most recognized, even if viewers never knew it wasn't Julia. One may barely notice these subtle swaps when you're watching the film, but they played a big part in creating Vivian's confident image. While Julia Roberts delivered the charm, wit, and emotion of Vivian, some of the physical visuals came from Shelley's behind-the-scenes work, literally stepping into Julia's boots. Number 13, the film was almost never made. It's hard to believe now, but Pretty Woman almost didn't make it to the big screen. The original story was dark and gritty, focused on the harsh realities of intimate work and unhealthy habits. It wasn't the lighthearted intimacy that audiences fell in love with. As a result, many studios were hesitant to get involved. The tone felt too risky, and the storyline didn't seem like something that people would want to watch, let alone cheer for. When J.F. Lawton first wrote the script, it was titled 3000 and had a very bleak ending. Edward leaves Vivian on the street, and there's no romance, no rescue, no fairy tale. It was more of a social commentary than a love story. Even when the idea began to evolve into something softer, studios were still unsure that it would work. A romantic comedy centered around a businessman and an adult worker, it sounded like a box office disaster in the making. Then Disney came into the picture. Through their adult film branch, Touchstone Pictures, they took a chance on the film. With director Gary Marshall on board, the story was rewritten into a charming Cinderella-style romance. Even with all the changes, there were still doubts about whether audiences would accept the unusual premise. Thankfully, they did. Pretty Woman went on to become one of the most successful romantic comedies of all time. Before the magic happened, it was just another project that was sitting in a pile of rejected scripts. Number 12, it was Disney's first R-rated film. Pretty Woman, a movie about a wealthy businessman falling in love with an adult worker, was backed by none other than Disney. However, it wasn't released under the classic Disney name. Instead, it was released through Touchstone Pictures, a division of Disney created to handle more mature and adult-oriented content. At the time, Disney wanted to expand beyond family-friendly animations and children's stories. Touchstone gave them the freedom to experiment with edgier films, without directly attaching the Disney name to them. Pretty Woman became one of their biggest and boldest projects, and also their first R-rated box office smash. The R rating was mainly due to adult themes, suggestive content, and language. Remember, even though the final version of the film became more of a romantic comedy, it still addressed topics such as intimate work, street life, and class differences, things Disney wouldn't dare touch with its traditional branding. Despite those risks, the move paid off. Pretty Woman was a massive success, earning over $460 million worldwide and launching Julia Roberts into superstardom. It also proved that Disney could thrive outside of its safe zone, paving the way for future adult-centered films under the Touchstone label. So while Mickey Mouse had absolutely nothing to do with Vivian and Edward's love story, Disney was still the powerhouse that was strongly behind the scenes, silently making history by stepping into new territory with a love story that broke all the rules. Number 11. Richard Gere really played the piano and wrote the music too. That elegant piano scene in the hotel lounge, where Edward is seen playing a beautiful piece of classical-sounding music late at night, wasn't a hand double or movie magic. Richard Gere actually played the piano himself, and more impressively, he composed the music for that scene too. The piece he played was entirely his own creation, not something pulled from a famous composer's work. Gere has been playing piano since he was a kid, and he's musically talented in real life, which came in handy for this particular moment in the film. Director Gary Marshall discovered his skill and decided to incorporate it into the character, adding a layer of depth to Edward's personality. In a movie all about breaking expectations, this small but classy detail helped humanize Edward even more. Instead of just being a wealthy, serious businessman, we get a glimpse of his softer, more artistic side. It made his character feel more relatable and even more romantic. That entire piano scene, followed by the playful moment where Vivian surprises him by climbing onto the piano, is one of the most memorable moments in the movie. Knowing now that Gere really played that tune makes it even cooler. So, while Julia Roberts brought the heart, Richard Gere added a little music, and not just to the piano, but to the emotional rhythm of the entire film. Number 10. Julia Roberts was just 21 when she filmed Pretty Woman. Julia Roberts lit up the screen, winning hearts with her charm, humor, and that unforgettable smile. However, here's something that many viewers don't even realize. She was only 21 years old when she acted in Pretty Woman. At that age, most people are just trying to figure out life. Julia, on the other hand, was leading a major Hollywood film that went on to become a global hit. At the time, she was still considered a rising star. She had already made an impression in Mystic Pizza, and she received critical praise for Steel Magnolias, but Pretty Woman was her big moment. It was her first lead in a romantic comedy, and the role was no small feat for her. Vivian was street-smart, vulnerable, funny, and deeply human. She had to bring all those layers to life, and she did it so naturally that audiences believed every second of it. Still, despite her age and inexperience, she gave a performance that was powerful and unforgettable. Her work in the film earned her a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination, catapulting her into worldwide fame. Looking back, it's incredible to think that someone so young carried such a massive film and turned it into a classic. Pretty Woman didn't just make Julia Roberts a star, it made her a legend. Number 9. The original ending was dark and heartbreaking. We all remember the fairy tale ending of Pretty Woman. Edward showing up in a white limo, climbing Vivian's fire escape with flowers, and the two of them choosing love over money and status. It's one of the most iconic rom-com endings ever. However, what many people don't know is that the film was never supposed to end that way. The original script had a much darker, more realistic conclusion, and it wasn't romantic at all. The film was originally titled 3000 and named after the $3,000 Edward pays Vivian for the week they spend together. This early version of the story was not a love story. It was a harsh, emotional drama about two broken people from completely different worlds who part ways just as they came together. In that version, there's no grand gesture, no emotional connection, no transformation. After their deal ends, Edward coldly drops Vivian off on the street, throws the money at her, and drives away. Vivian doesn't find love, security, or hope. She simply returns to the difficult life she was trying to escape. The script also suggested that she was battling with substance use, adding an even more tragic layer to her story. Number 8. Hector Elizondo was brought in to support Julia and the budget. Hector Elizondo, who played the warm-hearted hotel manager Barney, wasn't just cast because he fit the role. He was chosen specifically to help Julia Roberts feel more at ease on set. At the age of 21, Julia was still new to leading roles and navigating intimate, emotionally charged scenes. Director Gary Marshall recognized that she needed someone dependable and genuinely caring to lean on, both on camera and off. And this made Elizondo a perfect choice. The studio, however, didn't think that his role warranted the extra cost. They resisted bringing him on, arguing there wasn't room in the budget for his salary, despite how much Gary had believed in his importance. And rather than cut the support structure he valued, Gary made a bold move. He paid part of Hector's salary out of his own pocket, ensuring Elizondo could stay on and play Barney. Hector's contribution was not just a warm character moment, it was a strategic support system the director built to protect his young star. It's a reminder that sometimes the most impactful performances come from thoughtful choices off camera. Number 7. The fairy tale ending almost got cut for being too unrealistic. Believe it or not, that magical final scene where Edward shows up in a white limo, climbs the fire escape, and rescues Vivian with flowers was almost cut from the movie's man. That was because some studio executives and early test audiences felt that it was too unrealistic, even for a romantic comedy like this one. At one point in production, there was a very real tension between making Pretty Woman a grounded story versus letting it be a full-blown fantasy. The idea of a wealthy, emotionally distant businessman suddenly changing and running back to confess his love felt too much like a fairy tale for some of the people behind the scenes. They worried that audiences would not buy it, that it would come off as cheesy or forced. However, director Gary Marshall believed in the power of fantasy and hope. He knew that people do not just watch movies to see what is real. They watch to feel something, to escape, to believe that love can show up in unexpected places. He pushed back hard, insisting that the movie needed a joyful ending to balance the difficult themes it touched on. In the end, it was the fairy tale finish that made Pretty Woman unforgettable. Number 6. Vivian's blonde wig was a total headache. That choppy blonde wig Vivian wore when we first met her on the street behind the scenes caused more trouble than you would think. Julia Roberts' hair is naturally dark blonde and not red, even though we all remember that fiery red look later. When shooting began, she wore a synthetic blonde wig to complete her role of Vivian on-the-job disguise. But funnily enough, it didn't stay put. The wig would slip, shift, and pop off under the hot studio lights during takes, leading to frequent stops for adjustments. It was uncomfortable, itchy, and just hard to manage during long days of filming. The hassle paid off visually regardless. That blonde look was intentionally temporary. It was a mask that Vivian wore while working, The moment she revealed her real, flowing red hair, you could feel the instant transformation. The wig's unreliability became a symbol of her unraveling from her old life and stepping into something more true to herself. Number 5. Pretty Woman made Julia Roberts a superstar and changed her life. Before Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts was a talented newcomer with a few promising roles under her belt. She had already impressed critics in Mystic Pizza and earned an Oscar nomination for Steel Magnolias, but she wasn't yet a household name. That all changed in 1990, when Pretty Woman hit theaters and turned her into a global sensation almost overnight. Playing Vivian Ward, a role that many big-name actresses had turned down, Julia brought a rare mix of humor, vulnerability, sass, and warmth. She wasn't just acting, she was lighting up the screen, and audiences connected with her instantly. Her performance was so natural and captivating that she became the heart of the movie, even though Richard Gere was the established star and more popular. Pretty Woman didn't just give Julia Roberts a successful movie role. It completely transformed her life and career. It gave the world a star, and it gave Julia the kind of role most actors only dream about. The kind that defines a generation and stands the test of time. Number 4. The hotel featured in the movie is a real place you can visit. The luxurious hotel where Edward stayed and Vivian got her first taste of the high life is a real place and not just a movie set. The exterior and many of the interior scenes were shot at the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel, located in Beverly Hills, California. This hotel has since become a mini tourist attraction, thanks to the film's popularity. Back in the day, the Beverly Wilshire was already a well-known luxury spot. However, after the release of Pretty Woman, it reached a whole new level of fame. Fans from all over the world started showing up just to snap photos outside or to book a stay in the Pretty Woman suite, hoping to relive a bit of the movie magic. The hotel embraced the film's legacy and even started offering a special Pretty Woman for a Day package, complete with spa treatments, shopping on Rodeo Drive, and luxury accommodations. Yes, the hotel that played such a significant role in Vivian's transformation is very real and still as glamorous as ever. Number 3. Rodeo Drive boutiques refuse to let filming happen. One of the most iconic sequences in Pretty Woman is the shopping revenge scene where Vivian walked back into a high-end store after being rejected the day before and delivered the now famous line, "Big mistake, big, huge." It's a classic feel-good moment that audiences still quote today. However, here's what you probably didn't know. Many of the real stores on Rodeo Drive didn't want the film shot there. When producers first approached shops on the upscale Beverly Hills street, several boutique owners said no, and that was because the movie was about an adult worker falling in love with a wealthy businessman. The store owners felt it would reflect poorly on their luxury brand. They were afraid that it would cheapen their image or draw the wrong kind of attention. The rejection was so strong that the production had to create fake storefronts or film in nearby locations that resembled Rodeo Drive. Only a few stores agreed to participate in the movie, and even those did so cautiously. The scene, which celebrated confidence, redemption, and standing up for oneself, was nearly impossible to shoot as originally planned, but it ultimately became one of the film's most powerful and satisfying moments. Number 2. Richard Gere almost turned down the role until Julia convinced him. It's really hard to imagine anyone other than Richard Gere playing Edward Lewis. However, the truth is that Richard Gere almost didn't take the role. He read the script and wasn't sold on the character. He thought Edward was too cold, too stiff, and didn't see the emotional depth needed to bring the story to life. At one point, he had already turned it down, but director Gary Marshall wasn't ready to give up. He arranged a meeting between Gere and Julia Roberts, who had already been cast as Vivian. Julia, who was still fairly new to Hollywood but full of energy and charm, joined the meeting with a note in hand. While Gere and Marshall talked, she slipped him a post-it note that said, "Please say yes." Their chemistry became one of the strongest parts of the film, helping transform a dark script into a light-hearted, romantic masterpiece. If it weren't for Julia's sweet little note, we might have had a completely different Edward and possibly a very different Pretty Woman. Sometimes all it takes is a few handwritten words to make movie magic happen. Number 1. The necklace scene was completely improvised, and Julia's reaction was real. One of the most charming and memorable scenes in Pretty Woman was when Edward presented Vivian with a stunning diamond necklace before their big night out. As she reached for it, he suddenly snapped the box shut, and she burst into a loud, genuine laugh. It was such a sweet and spontaneous moment that audiences have loved for decades. And here's the fun part of it all. The whole moment was never in the script. The scene was originally meant to be more formal and elegant. Edward simply gives her the necklace and they move on. However, director Gary Marshall, known for his love of natural reactions and surprises, had a completely different idea. He pulled Richard Gere aside and whispered to him, "When she goes to take it, snap the box shut just for fun." So Gere did exactly that, and Julia's laugh was 100% real. She wasn't expecting it, and her shocked belly laugh reaction was so honest and joyful that Marshall knew right away he had to keep it in the movie. Which of these weird facts did you not know before now? Kindly share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.